My name is Merrick. I work downstairs at the Career Center as a career coach. A couple of my colleagues are here. Nice to see them supporting me. In the past life, I was worked in sports psychology. That's kind of where the expertise in flow kind of comes from. So I'm tying in kind of the performance world with career development as well. And so that's kind of a unique twist I'm trying to bring to the table here. And also forewarning, my kids are sick and they didn't sleep at all last night, and I didn't sleep as a result. So I'm on an adrenaline, but this is good. Flow, it gets me into flow as a result. So I promise it'll still be really good as we move forward. But yeah, we're talking about flow today. How many of you, out of curiosity, heard about flow before? Know the concept. Awesome. So a couple no's, couple yeses. So for those of you who already know flow, we'll dive a little deeper into kind of what it is. And for those of you who don't know, this is a good introduction to what kind of it is and how we can maximize flow in your life. So the agenda for today, we're going to start off with kind of a problem. And actually, funny, I am a LWI, Leading with Influence alumni. Lisa will be proud to say this is my kind of my passion project come to fruition. So I kind of started with this idea of this kind of employee engagement problem and flow. And this is a perfect opportunity that Tyreek invited me to talk about. So it's kind of coming to fruition, which is really kind of cool. So we're going to start off with the problem. We're going to talk about what that problem is. Then we're getting into, before we talk about what kind of flow is, we're going to actually have all of you discuss your experience of flow and engagement. So we're going to do something that you're familiar with, the 1, 2, 4 all activity. So we'll do that as a kind of a group exercise. Then we'll talk about what is actually flow, talk about some of the science behind it, and end off with some hands-on practice. And my objective for today is to leave you here with some strategies to maximize your engagement in work and life. Whatever way you see it, some of you might like to blend those two together, some of you like to separate those two. So it's totally up to you how you want to kind of approach it, right? But we're going to talk about how we can maximize engagement, okay? So the problem. This is from a Gallup study just recently. They found globally 21% of people are engaged at work, right? So that leaves 79% of people worldwide are just not engaged with what they're doing at work. And I feel that's kind of a big problem, right? Not just from a U of A or organizational standpoint of lost productivity, but your own personal satisfaction and fulfillment is lacking, right? In Canada and the US, it's a little bit slightly higher, it's 31%, but I think it's still a huge problem where we're missing out on so much more engagement. Given the fact that we spend around average 80,000 hours in our careers, right? And if that's 80% of it is not engaged, right? I think it's a problem, right? How many of you are engaged at work? No, I'm just kidding. I do this with my staff sometimes. It's funny to see their face. But yeah, so obviously some of you might be engaged, some of you might not be, right? But we're trying to solve this, or at least not necessarily solve the problem, but chip away at this problem. And this has been steadily kind of going downwards since, I think it was 2020, they saw kind of a dip in engagement. Any idea of why that might be the case? Why would engagement drop? Pandemic, big source of that, yeah, for sure. People start questioning, what's the point of this? What's the meaning of my career, my life? I don't have the answers. I'm looking for the answers here. Any ideas? Yeah, some people maybe it was more engaging for them. Some people maybe not so much. Yeah? Your hand was up back there.
Yeah, I wonder if part of the pandemic effect was that people really started to think about how their values were represented in their work. I mean, there was that whole thing about the great quit or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
Great resignation.
Yeah.
And also, there's just so much happening, literally, globally, and locally. It's just complicated times, and I wonder if that draws our energy levels down.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I was going to mention the economic impact as well. Inflation, organizations being impacted, employees being impacted, and that impacting that personal drive as well.
Yeah, lots of different factors, right, affecting our engagement levels. Of course, it varies from job to job, country to country, but I think it's a huge problem that we need to kind of address. Some organizations, this is working? Well, it doesn't work on this, but some organizations are seeing, best practice organizations are seeing a little bit more engagement levels. So for example, Patagonia, somebody might be familiar with their policy of let my people go surfing. It's actually a policy where if the surf is good, they can go surfing, right? We might not necessarily do that here. Maybe the U of A is like, let's go surfing, there's no waves, maybe cross-country skiing, right? That'd be kind of a cool thing. And they see a big uptick in engagement levels. This is from a couple of years ago. I think it's changed now. So over 90% engagement levels, 4% turnover rate, right? So there's some things that organizations can do for sure to help with their engagement levels. But we're going to focus more so on kind of individual level today. But there is some potential solutions to this engagement problem, right? So actually recently just started reading this book because I talked about this. I'm like, I should probably read the book that I'm kind of talking about. But it's kind of a thick book, but there's lots of cool policies. They have very flexible policy for their employees to help with them, right? So, and of course, why this is important, engagement really means kind of job satisfaction, right? So again, there's of course productivity increases, all that kind of stuff. We're not talking about that. We're talking about your own personal satisfaction in your work life, right? So, and it's largely determined by freedom to decide how you perform your work, or when there's a surf, you can go surfing. Clear tasks with clear defined end, start and end. Variety in the type of task that you kind of do, right? So that's always nice to be invited to stuff like this because there's a variety in my kind of day-to-day. Right? Feedback, so you know how well you're doing, right? How many of us don't get enough feedback in our day, or the feedback is very vague, right? Hey, you did a good job, cool, move on, kind of thing, right? And work that helps others, right? I think that's a big factor. We're human beings at the end of the day, social beings. We want to help others, and that's a huge determinant of job satisfaction. So if you want to feel good about yourself, just help others. That's kind of the first place to kind of start. Oops. And so this is one of the bigger factors of a major meta-analysis to be predictors of job satisfaction. So that's kind of the crux of what we're kind of talking about today and how we can increase some of these things. If you're interested in some more of the research, 80,000 Hours, it's an organization that talks about kind of careers and how to maximize your impact in your work life if you want some further reading. But so these are the good things. Nowadays, we're missing most of these things, right? Few jobs have very clear goals. They don't provide adequate feedback in how we're kind of doing. The skills are not matched to what maybe you're doing a job maybe not really suited for, right? There's a lack of control, maybe in your schedule, right? You can't go surfing whenever you kind of want, right? You have to kind of stay here. You're clocked in. Rhythm's external to the worker, right? So you have to clock in at 8 o'clock and leave at 4:30, whatever it is, right? There's a rhythm that you have to kind of follow, fortunately or unfortunately, in your day-to-day. Right, so something's missing. There are some things on an organizational level that potentially we can do, but I'm not here to change the whole structure. But there's things that we can personally do potentially to maximize that, right? So my argument is, could the flow experience be a potential solution to some of this? There's so many factors affecting job satisfaction that we're not going to talk about, right? So obviously fair pay, the culture itself, all those sorts of things. But there's something we can potentially do with the tasks itself, inside of work and outside of work, that could potentially be a solution to this engagement problem, right? So that's what we're talking about today, is using flow as a way to maximize engagement, right? Still with me? Yes. So before we kind of get into what kind of flow is, we're going to get into a quick activity to hear from each other about what the experience might be like, right? So I'm going to define flow a little bit later, but let's talk about the experience of it first, because everyone here 100% has experienced flow in some capacity, right? You might even know it, but there's some experiences there that are worth kind of sharing. So I want to hear, we're going to do, how many of you have done the 1, 2, 4 all exercise before? No LWI alumni here? Okay, So this is my first time doing the 1, 2, 4 all, facilitating it, so we'll see how I do. But basically what we're going to do is, so this is all versions of the same prompt. So basically the question is, tell me about a time you were actively engaged with something, either at work or outside of work. So that's kind of the prompt. These are all versions of the same question. What we're going to do, first you're going to reflect personally by yourself for a few minutes. So you can use the sheets on your table, you can write on there, or if you have your own notebook, write it down there. It's a few minutes of just reflection of, think about a time that you were just in flow, right, engaged. And then what we're going to do after a few minutes, we're going to go into pairs, and you're going to share your experience with your neighbor. Like, this is how my experience was, tell me about your experience, right? And then see some commonalities, what are some themes emerging? And then 4, which means 4 people, right? So you might have to move some tables here, but 5 is fine, I think, as well. But we're going to do, and then share with 4 people your experiences of flow, and try to notice what are these that each maybe table kind of came across. What are some similarities? Was it purely at work, purely in sport, leisure, or combination, or what are some words that kind of came up? So I don't know which switch, maybe someone wants to kind of start us.
Lose track of time.
Lose track of time, right? Is that a commonality between some other tables? Yeah, so losing track of time, a symptom of flow, which we'll kind of talk about right away here as well. What else there? Yeah.
Some of the ones that I noticed were this flow happens or engagement when you're imparting knowledge to others, so it's, having a teaching role.
Yeah.
And then also if you are engaged in learning or exploring.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, this is teaching, like facilitating this provides me with a lot of flow. Right? Even a lot of times, sometimes even big presentations, I get still nervous, but I know, hey, there's flow on the other side of that, right? Which kind of keeps me kind of going, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of our common themes as well. It's not just about the output of our work, but also what we're getting out of it. So you mentioned learning, and that was a huge piece in our
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Lisa had a good one when she mentioned like not getting stuck in her head, and then later on, Oliver shared that you're unplugging yourself from your self-judgment. So what I gathered from that is you're present, you're being mindful, you're letting go of what's external.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is a symptom. We'll talk about why that happens a lot. But yeah, the inner critic shuts up in flow, right? That nagging inner self, it's quiet, right? It's a very pleasurable experience, right? What else? What are some other ways we find engagement and flow? I heard a drummer. I think I heard you. You were a drummer, right? Yeah. Musicians talk about being in the pocket. Have you heard of that term? Yeah. So I like that term a lot, being in the pocket, right? Yeah.
Finding a level of challenge in it. So you talked about, cooking and not being fully familiar with the recipes. Something that, definitely one of the things that keep you focused on the task. So yeah, finding that level of challenge. When you're doing something that you're fully comfortable with, we can reach that level of like stagnation maybe. We get bored with the work, but it's like something that motivates us.
Exactly. Yeah. So we want challenge. We're humans. We want to be challenged and seek ways to be challenged and all sorts of things, right? And cooking is a great place for that, right? Anything else? I heard the gym. Yeah, being in the gym, right? Right. So this happens in a variety of different places, right? That's kind of the point. There's so many ways we can find flow, right? Often kind of work is kind of neglected, and we'll talk about this later, but we tend to find more flow at work, and we tend to neglect, we kind of focus more stuff outside of work, but flow or work is a good place to find flow, but there's so many different ways we can find it, right? Just a couple of examples here, a surgeon, right? So when I start operating, I enter a domain as unlike anything else. The concentration is so intense, I don't feel tired, I don't feel hungry, right? I'm tired, but I don't feel tired right now because maybe I'm in flow right now. But so everything changes, right? Time changes because everything's happening in slow motion. Other times the whole operation is over before I know it. A heart surgeon I talked to at the Mazinkowski talked about how he has a saying, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. He talks about when he's in surgery, kind of he just slows it down and he kind of in this timeless kind of space, right? Really kind of cool. Formula One drivers talk about they're being one with the car, right? It's almost like they're not driving the cars, kind of one in the cars. It's both together, right? A little closer to home, maybe obviously some of us might be surgeons, but when we're working on stuff like this, we're working on a report, everything clicks. Feels like I'm solving a puzzle where all the pieces fit perfectly. Lose track of time. Work seems to flow effortlessly from mind onto the page. Don't feel tired, distracted, completely engaged, and getting the details right, right? So very commonalities here. This is my cue not to go beyond.
Oh, okay. I just didn't want you to trip.
Yeah, it's there on purpose, yeah. Because I'm gonna be out of frame if I'm over here. I tend to wander a lot when I talk, but right. So a couple of experiences of flow, right? So that's kind of what flow is. You kind of described amongst yourselves. That's the experience of flow, right? And now we're going to talk about what the actual kind of some of the science behind it, some definitions of it. But everyone has their own personal experience of it, right? Cross-culturally, this is everyone from any single nation on earth. Everyone describes flow in very similar ways, right? So it doesn't discriminate between anyone. So the flow experience. So this guy right here, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, very tough word to say, Hungarian-American psychologist, considered the godfather of flow. He recently just passed away, but back in the 70s, he kind of started researching this and trying to explore what's this thing that people keep kind of talking about. And he researched, chess players and people doing some other sports or any across domains. And he found a lot of similarities in the way they talked about the experience. He talked about flow. And that's kind of where the term flow kind of came from, is people describing their experience as effortless and that kind of stuff, right? And so the definition he put forward is a mental state of operation, which a person performing an activity is fully immersed in a feeling of energized focus, full involvement and enjoyment in the process of the activity, right? So that's kind of what you all just kind of described amongst yourselves. And that's kind of some of the definitions we're working with. It's an optimal state of consciousness, right? We feel our best, we perform our best, right? It's all of us have experienced it in some degree, but maybe don't have the language to kind of talk about it. But that's when we're going to be shedding some light on today, right? Happens in so many different places. I know Anna, she's an artist. She probably experiences flow, and she's a very good artist, right? Follow her Instagram, right? Artists talk about it, obviously surfers being in that kind of that way, that little pocket in between, what they call it, Tyree, what they call it when they're surfing? What's it called when they're in that kind of tunnel? It's a tunnel, yeah. Yeah, so they kind of talk about flow in that sense, right? Group flow is a big aspect of this. So individual flow, and there's also group flow, where we're working together on some projects. It's a lot more complex, but that's a very pleasurable experience too, because we're social beings. We experience a lot of flow together, right? So doing some group activities could be very powerful. And of course, we can have altered perceptions of creativity when we're in flow, right? So effortless attention, being in the zone, feeling in control. There's a reduced effort, right? You don't feel like you're putting in effort. It's almost like it's effortless, right? In the pocket. The inner critic, right, shuts up. We feel a sense of enjoyment and a lot of confidence when we're in flow as well, right? So a lot of similarities to what we're all kind of talking about amongst yourselves. So these are some of the outcomes that kind of Csikszentmihalyi and others kind of found. So these are things so you can call them symptoms of flow. So first of all, there's a focused attention. We're focused on the task at hand, right? I heard that a lot from some of this group. There's a merging of action and awareness, right? That Formula One driver with the cars, there's this merging of mind and body and the machine, right? A sense of control. It's almost like you're not even doing the thing. Some people describe flow as someone else pulling the strings in a sense, but they're totally in control. They're not even thinking about it, they're doing the next move, right? A rock climber just finds the perfect hold without even thinking about it, right? Distortion of time, very common, you kind of mentioned, right? Time either slows down or speeds up. It's still not very clear of why that kind of happens. I mean, sometimes it could be a evolutionary adaptation. So for example, when we're in a car crash, we tend to kind of slow down so we have more time to kind of respond and react. So there's something like a theory of that. Sometimes it kind of speeds up, right? We're working on a report, 5 hours goes by in 20 minutes. I forgot to eat, forgot to do all these sorts of things, right? And so it can be pleasurable. It's so pleasurable that we forget things, right? Loss of self-consciousness, right? That inner critic we talked about, right? So that kind of shuts up. We're just focused on the task at hand and not how we're doing, what we're doing, right? And so we're just there. And then intrinsic motivation, right? So autotelic experience. So autotelic, a Greek word in of itself, right? So we're doing things just purely because they're enjoyable for ourselves, right? Regardless if we're getting paid or not, or getting some reward, we're doing it because it's fun, right? And so those are kind of the outcomes that we kind of described and based on some of the research. And then why that happens, some of the neuroscience behind it, it's actually called, the scientific term for flow is transit hypofrontality. Transit means lasting for a short period of time. Hypo means low. Frontality, the prefrontal cortex, front part of our brain, where we house most of our kind of higher order functions, so working memory, reasoning, all the important stuff we use our brain for. It tends to down-regulate, which means we kind of shuts up, right? So we're not actually using more of our brain in flow, we're actually using less of it in a sense, right? So there's resources allocated that used to be allocated for overthinking and judging ourselves, now that move towards the task at hand, right? So frees up space for focus on the task at hand, right? So that's kind of what Arne Dietrich, researcher, kind of coined the term transit hypofrontality. But that's kind of why some of the stuff we tend to not overthink when we're in flow, because we're down-regulating in our brain, right? Flow is very tough to research, by the way, right? It's very, very difficult. It's still, I wouldn't say it's in its infancy, but as more, technology kind of catches up, we're getting a better sense of what's happening in the brain in flow. But it's tough to find people, hey, you're in flow, let's scan your brain kind of thing. But there's cool studies where had jazz musicians and they measure their brain and they kind of scan them there, and then they found the parts of their brain were the verbal linguistic parts of their brain were shutting down, right? They're not overthinking, right? It's kind of interesting stuff, right? So if there's anything you get out of today, it's this slide here, the golden rule of flow. So flow, I know you mentioned, can challenge, right? So we want to find an optimal balance between our level of challenge in something and a level of skill in something. So if we're too challenged and our skill level is too low, we're going to experience anxiety, right? Put me in front of a stadium full of people, I'm going to get more and more anxious as opposed to 20 people, right? On the other hand, if your skill level is too high and your challenge is too low, you're going to be bored and too relaxed, right? And so it's all about finding that kind of optimal balance between your challenge and skill. You want to be stretched just enough that we're moving towards kind of flow, right? So it's about what are some activities that puts you in some of these states. And you can manipulate some of these as well, because this is perceived challenge and perceived skill. So how you perceive yourself. So another person could be in the same position as me right now, could be more challenged, right? Or they have more skill or less skill, right? It's all about how you perceive it. So do I need to reduce the challenge or increase the challenge? To increase skill, we don't necessarily reduce skill, but can I increase skill and play around with the challenge? And that could include just the way you speak to yourself. Seeing something as, hey, it's not a threat, it's a challenge. I want to overcome this. This is something I want to work towards, right? Reframing the situation can be one way to reduce some of the anxiety in that challenge and have you go from arousal to kind of go to flow just by reframing the situation, right? So ultimately, flow is the reward you get for kind of tackling a kind of difficult challenge. Any questions about the challenge-skill balance? Or any questions so far? Make sense, right? And we'll talk about other ways to other conditions for flow, but this is kind of the big one that has the most research behind it, is the kind of challenge-skill balance. So start thinking about, and this is one of the activities we'll do, but start thinking about what are some activities that are maybe challenge me too much? How can I manipulate maybe that challenge? Or maybe some skill I need to develop a little further. And skill can be, again, perceived. So maybe you think you're not good enough, but actually in actuality you are, right? And that's a big thing. So getting feedback from other people is important. No, actually you are good enough on this. And that can completely change where you find yourself in some of these categories. As Csikszentmihalyi says, the best moments in our lives are not the passive, receptive times, relaxing times. The best moments usually occur if a person's body or mind is stretched to its limits and doing something difficult and worthwhile. And that's a big thing with flow, is we want to stretch ourselves, right? Take this with a grain of salt, but some people play around with the idea of like having 4% challenge over your skills, like just 4% more than you're capable of. Just stretch yourself just a little bit more, right? Rather than having a perfect balance, but just enough. So what are some of those activities I can do to play around with, right? Pulling that thread a little bit more, right? So finding things that are difficult and worthwhile, that's where the good stuff comes. That's where flow happens. And flow tends to fall on a spectrum, right? We can have micro flow and then macro. Micro is like, maybe you're watching a movie with a loved one. You're not actually kind of doing anything, not putting an action towards it, but there's some element of immersion, right? All the way up to, free soloing El Capitan. It's a very, very difficult thing to do, and probably a lot of flow happens there. Risk is a big flow trigger, but you don't have to do that yourselves if you're not comfortable with. So finding what are some of the activities in my life that fit on this spectrum, right? Walking in nature, having a good conversation with someone, doing a presentation, coding, right? Doing some sort of group activity. Like I mentioned, group flow is a big flow trigger, right? So finding ways to what are some of these activities and where can I put them on the spectrum, right? What are the things I kind of do, and how can I get more of these things, right? So everyone is different. But it's about starting to put language into this and start identifying, okay, which activities put me in a boredom section, which activities put me in anxiety, which are more arousal, flow, right? And how can I manipulate some of those and get there more often, right? Tons of benefits. So it's not just flow is good, but flow is really good. There's the more engagement, which we talked about in the beginning, right? Correlated job satisfaction. We're more engaged when we're in flow. There's more life satisfaction. People report more life satisfaction, fulfillment, the more flow they have in their lives. Better mental health, increased creativity, right? Because we're not self-conscious in this state. We tend to think about ideas that we thought about before, right? We're painting something that's, I didn't think about doing that, and I painted this. So we're more creative in that state, right? Increased confidence, right? Because again, we're not overthinking, we're not judging ourselves. We're out of our own way, right? There's that ego is in the way, it's kind of out of the way, and we can just kind of do the thing. We're more confident as a result. More productive, as the organizations would benefit from that, of course. More career capital, so you do more high quality work, and that obviously translates into better things down the road, right? But essentially, and then Tyree loves this slide. When you're fully engaged with life, right, the question of meaning doesn't really arise. We're so engaged in something, you're not worried about, am I on the right path? Am I doing the right thing, right? That thought doesn't enter your head because you're just so focused on the task at hand. And that's where this can be very, very powerful, right? So we're not preoccupied with ourselves. We actually have a chance to expand the concept of who we are, the concept of self. And so the loss of self-consciousness leads to self-transcendence in a way, right? The boundaries of our being have been pushed forward. So once you're in flow, you realize, hey, I'm capable of so much more, right, that I never realized, right? So the more we have these experiences, we don't have to, because that's the biggest question of life, right? What's the meaning of life? What am I here? Hey, I've shifted my mission towards life is just having more flow experiences, because then that question kind of goes out the window because I'm just so engaged with what I'm doing, right? Not to say I'm always in flow all the time, that's impossible, but I'm working towards it. Quick video. Right, so it's funny, right? The more we think about flow, the less actually likely we are to get into flow. The funny thing is, right? It's funny that when you're in flow, you're like, oh, I'm in flow, and like, oh, I'm out of it now. Right? That's the first. So it takes a lot of practice to kind of, psychologists call it the elongated now. Trying to elongate that now, the presence of where I am right now. It takes practice and training to practice, right? So any questions? Right, so they talked about some of these. So how do I get my flow now, right? That's kind of what we're talking about now. We're going to end off with some activity. If we talk about flow, like, shut up, Merrick, I want to get into flow more often, right? So they talk about some of these, but these are some of the antecedents or like prerequisites to get into flow. So the more you have these conditions present, the more likely you are to get into flow. There's no magic formula to get into flow. We're just increasing the chances of it to happen. And these are some of the ones to get there. So obviously we talked about challenge, skill, balance already. Having clear objectives, right? Having clear idea of point A to B, what does that look like? Even between A to B, what does it kind of look like? Micro scale goals, right? Or in the macro sense, you can think about it that way as well. Having immediate feedback as well. So a basketball player does a free throw. Feedback is the ball goes in or out. That's immediate feedback. Your manager can give you feedback, but that's sometimes outside of your control, right? So what kind of feedback systems can I implement into my day-to-day to help me kind of find more flow and engage my progress? Right? A comedian or a musician gets feedback from the audience. I'm getting feedback from the audience of someone's falling asleep or not, right? That's immediate feedback, right? So that's why comedians and musicians, they tend to experience a lot of flow because they get that feedback right away, right? And in deep focus, you might have noticed deep focus is also a outcome of flow, but I put it in there as well because it's a trainable component as well. You can set the environment up for focus. You can train your attention through like mindfulness and that kind of stuff, right? So these are kind of the things we want to focus on to find more flow, right? We're more likely to have a bigger flow state when all of these are present. We can still potentially find flow when some of these are present as well. I like to give an example of our ancestors or hunter-gatherers. I'm not saying we have to go back to this pre-modern era to find flow, but I feel they had more flow in their day-to-day just because the environment was set up for more flow. So for example, challenge skill, right? They're constantly honing their skills by hunting and growing crops or whatever it is, right? There's a lot of opportunities to maximize challenge and skill. The goals are very clear, right? I need to eat to survive. I need to hunt to survive. That's a very clear goal in that sense, right? So that kind of provides a lot of feedback, right? Or when you're doing some archery, right, the goal is to hit the target, right? That's very clear as well. Feedback was immediate. I'm hungry, I'm not hungry, I'm still alive, I got the kill, right? My crops are growing, right? That's feedback in itself as well, right? And then risk tends to heighten awareness, right? So there's a lot of risk back then, obviously. And so I'm not telling us to go back and hunt saber-toothed tigers to find a risk or climb mountains, but you can find ways to, risk can mean different things to different people. Like what's my tolerance for risk? Emotional risk, financial risk, social risk, right? There's different types of risk that we can play around with, right? So I like to think they had more flow back then because the environment was set up. But we can incorporate some of these things in our modern day as well. And so funny enough, Csikszentmihalyi's research found that we find flow more at work than we do kind of our leisure time. And it's not saying sport, because sport obviously is a big very flow prone in sport, but leisure time. So why do you think, why might this be the case? Why do we find more work out of, even though most people say they don't want to be at work, and that's kind of another part of the research, they found they don't want to be at work, but they actually find more flow at work. So why would that be the case? More challenge or less challenge? Less challenge. Would that be more?
Leisure time.
In leisure time, yeah, potentially, yeah. And why?
Well, because you're trying to unwind from the day and you're trying to, like rest and replenish yourself before the next day of challenge.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. Any other ideas? Yeah.
More strict structure, focusing on achieving results, whatever they might be.
Yeah.
Personal life, again, usually we don't have that. Oh, if I don't do this, I'm not going to get paid.
Yeah, there's more structure on work, right? There's more opportunity for feedback, for goals, right? Leisure time, which is, oh, I'm just going to go do this, right? And it's unstructured, tends to be, right? And so potentially we can find more flow by just putting a little bit more structure towards our leisure activities potentially, right? Having more intentionality with our leisure time, right? So any other ideas why we find more flow at work, even though we don't want to be at work in some cases? Yeah.
Kids
Kids
aren't there.
aren't there. Yeah.
Well, no, that's a good point. Distractions, fewer
Yeah.
distractions.
Fewer distractions. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. We had a hand up.
Something about the boundaries of awareness. So at work, you have other people giving you feedback normally, and also you have to respect other people's opinions. At home, you have your partners or your kids, your people in your life, but there's something about that parameters of setting the expectation.
Yeah, a lot more variables at work potentially at play, right? But something interesting, right? But it's important to mention that you can not necessarily flow and job satisfaction are related, but it's not contradictory to say, you hate your job, but you can find flow at work, right? Because flow is a state of activation where job satisfaction is so many variables, right? The pay, the climate, the environment, right? But you can have, and this is where we can play around with, even if you might not like your job, there's tasks potentially you can do to find more flow to make it more engaging, more satisfying. And that's kind of the thing we can play around with. So that's the good news. Like, hey, even though I hate my job, there's some things that potentially I can play around with, job craft, right? And see what else I can play around with. Okay, so we'll get into the activity now. So on your sheets, there's a couple of different things. There's the flow inventory. So that one is just like kind of a assessment to gauge your current level of flow at work and see what your potential kind of score and see where or some areas maybe are lacking. And then the next pages there are using this 8-channel flow model, start to think about what are activities I can start to put into each one of these categories. What do I need to play around with to increase my flow? Is it feedback? Is it more clearer goals? What are the activities I could place in each of these categories? And then the very last page, those are just kind of a list of your work and in your leisure time. What are some activities you can start to implement and start to give yourself a challenge skill balance rating, for example, and start to identify what are these activities I can do to find more flow in my day-to-day, right? So this is a personal thing for you. You don't have to complete it now if you don't want to, but start thinking about it personally. Obviously, we want to put this into action, right? So the first step, what we're doing is we're developing awareness. This exercise here is just developing awareness of your challenge skill balance, right? What needs to be manipulated? Do I need to increase challenge, decrease challenge, right? Reflect on those activities. What experiences provide me with flow? Why are we not having more of those things, right? Let's set a time for doing more of those things. So taking a Wolf inventory, we do it like you're just doing here. The VIA character strength survey is a cool one as well. It's online, it's free, evidence-based. That kind of shows your character strengths, and the more we can align our work with our character strengths, the more likely we are to find flow as well. So that's an interesting one to take if you have the time. So it's based on kind of positive psychology research, Martin Seligman. But yeah, just developing awareness is the first step. That's kind of first step to flow and figuring out what needs to be adjusted as we kind of move forward. Next one is, right, so setting clear goals with feedback. So set micro or macro kind of objectives. So for example, 2 hours work on a presentation, the metric is time, right? That's how I develop slides. There's a slide that I have the Pomodoro technique, which is on that sheet, right? You put a timer on. I'm gonna do 5 Pomodoros worth of work today. It's a clear metric of time, right? I'm getting some feedback, just how many Pomodoros I've done. How many applicants for a job shadow program, for example, we're doing at the Career Center. right? The metric is the number of applicants, for example. So I want to reach a certain amount of applicants. That's another metric I can do. So just think about where are the goals I can start to fit in and make it very clear. It has to be a very unambiguous goal. Feedback systems, right? It's internal and external. Internal could be subjective energy levels, your satisfaction levels, your own self-talk, right? That's way more inside your control than getting feedback from your manager, for example, right? But start to implement. Hey, can I get some reviews from someone? Can I sit in with my supervisor more often? Just get more clearer feedback, right? Having that conversation potentially. Like I mentioned, comedians, musicians get more reaction time. And that's clear feedback from their audience, right? So where can I find feedback systems? If I can't find anything externally, hey, I need to rely on myself. What are some metrics I can create for myself, right? And setting the environment, right? Environment for deep work. So eliminate your distractions. I mean, this is specifically for work, but in sport, obviously, there's going to be a lot of distractions and stuff, which is conducive to flow sometimes. But at work, hey, tell people, hey, I'm going to flow right now. There's someone I heard had on their door, it had a sheet that said, F off, I'm flowing, right? So just tell people this is my time for myself, right? Put in your calendar, deep work time, right? Block up your calendar, time blocking, schedule, time for flow. So it's your leisure time. So sometimes we just like ad hoc just start to do some leisure, but like, hey, can I maybe start to be more intentional about the leisure time, manipulate some of the conditions for flow. Start of day, end of day ritual. Could be one way just to, because sometimes when we're flow, there's a dark side to flow as well. When we're flowing too much, and there can be some potential dark sides to that as well. Some research on that, and people are just doing extreme sports too often, for example, right? Have a clear start day, end of day. Now I'm done for the day. Even just like even the door can be a sign of I'm walking through this threshold, time to be done. I go home, right? Now parent mode, right? So finding ways just to shut off. Could be just simple, just shutting down the laptop or whatever it is. Breathing exercises, novelty, different locations, right? Do a stand-up desk. That's why I do stand-up desk, get more flow, right? But finding different locations could be a trigger for some ideas, but especially. Job crafting we talked about. What's within your control in your job that you can manipulate? Maybe the relationships, maybe the task itself. Have a conversation with your supervisor, manager. Where can I do more of the thing that I kind of want to do, right? I want to do more public speaking things. Can I do more of that, right? And music, that's why I have music on the background. It's a potent kind of flow trigger, right? So those are all things we can start to manipulate, right? Awareness of it, setting goals, feedback, manipulating your challenge scale balance, setting the environment for flow. A big thing to mention is a lot of us, so there's the kind of the neurochemistry behind flow. A lot of times people get stuck in the struggle phase. So when something's very difficult, they're like, it's too difficult, I don't want to do it anymore. But they're missing out on the flow because we want to push through that struggle phase. And that's when the good cocktail of neurochemicals are released, when we start to release, and that's when the kind of flow happens, right? And so when you're in that struggle phase, embrace it, reframe it. Hey, this is good, I'm just flow on the other side of this, right? I'm anxious or I'm tired or whatever, there's a struggle phase. Hey, let's get through it. Flow's on the other side of that. And then leave time for recovery as well. We can't be in flow all the time. If someone says they're constantly in flow, that's impossible. Right? So have time to recover mentally, physically as well, to get back into flow. And if you're interested in some more reading on flow, there's obviously Csikszentmihalyi's books are really good for flow. Cal Newport, Deep Work, some of his strategies are on that sheet. These are some of the more scientific research ones, Flow at Work, some of the stuff I cited today. New show with Chris Hemsworth, actually just watched Limitless on Disney, National Geographic. They talk about some of the science behind flow. It's kind of a cool show. And then he's pretty cool. He's doing some challenging things, which is actually pretty cool. I'm surprised he did all of them, which is nice to see. This is a really cool one. Stephen Kotler, he's a journalist, but he's probably one of the bigger experts on flow. That was my first introduction to flow, is The Rise of Superman. So a really good book, kind of a more digestible than some of the academic reading. And then shameless plug of my own book here as well. And so actually, Tyree handed out some little sheets in terms of what is one takeaway from today. So what we're going to do actually, if you want, put down what your takeaway from today, put your name on it, and we enter it into a draw. We have 2 books, and I'm going to give away 2 of my books if you want. You can give away to someone else if you don't want it. But we're going to draw and then have that as a takeaway.